Got another couple of hours. We're back with the meeting from before, which is now on again. So I would like to welcome our first submitter, Peter McKinney, who's here in person, I believe. No, my Peter, if you want to take the podium, you'll have 5 minutes, including time for any questions.
Well, kia ora, greetings. I'm come here and promise myself not to be a grumpy old man. It's Kōrau. So, look, thanks for the opportunity to submit. I'm a local resident. I'm submitting on my own behalf and in a group sense to the fact that the local community has quite a gathering regarding the pool. So why am I here? Well, personal submission, comments that I'm passing on from the community, and finally noting a few points that I find incorrect in terms of what I understand about the Kōrau pool, the proposal to close. I'm going to look at the setting of the pool, the whole situation. No doubt you've all heard about community consultation, or what's seen as the lack of community consultation, and an opinion from it. So what I understand from having listened to the council's or read your websites, you've had a number of meetings. I had one on the 15th of February. That's the one simply came and considered only two options, one being a rebuild or continuation with the planned rebuild of the pool, or else closure, because the option of continuing with the status quo, shall we say, with any maintenance required, was considered to be out of scope. That's the first objection that the local community is taking, that we just simply do not, and personally do not understand that that's something that's 100-year-old, keeps on going, seems to reopen every season, can't continue for a period, because we understand up to 2030 the buildings, the changing rooms can continue in use. I am actually a swimmer, I'll add to. I've had old bad knees and I've swum for years at the pools and find the pool itself convenient in the summer after hours. Okay, so in terms of the proposal, the lacking the ability to continue, the community that I live in Kōrau, which I will say I live there, feels that it's continued. Why not just keep it going with maintenance? We're not looking for a splash palace, and in fact, if you asked the community, you wouldn't want to have a splash palace built there. The whole charm of the area is the fact that it's very simplistic. It lets you cool off in the summer on a hot day, and you can exercise there, as I say we do. But we do not understand the cost estimates of the rebuild, because those cost estimates appear to include the work that is deemed to be required on the stream maintenance and flooding issues that do, and I admit, have occurred. I've lived in Kōrau for many years. And we see that the 11.5 million cost estimate for a rebuild includes landscaping work, and we understand it's around about $4.5 million to do just to close it. So you're going to spend money to close the pool. The operating costs are relatively minimal. Lifeguards, the water's not heated, and the pool itself is not leaking. So we're saying keep going what we have, maintain it. You have another 6 years, until 2030 with the buildings that, and again, we understand any work on repairing the buildings is going to be an issue because it has to be up to current standards, but we're saying surely insulation and the like for changing rooms is hardly relevant. So that's really the problems that we have. Community consultation, how on earth you came to the cost of doing the repair work. The community seems to be very happy with the status quo, and ultimately we're saying why on earth exclude that option? Why not consider the option of status quo with work on the stream that's all going to be required in any case? And seeing that I have a minute left over, that's really the summary of what, as a community member and as the local group that are meeting regarding it, feel. I put in a submission, I've never done it before. All the other points about rubbish collection, whatever, well, in the end we sort of feel what will be, and whether we need bins and don't, that's irrelevant to me, but unfortunately I had to put a lot of points in that, and I tried to go down the middle path of, well, the council knows best, but I don't believe the council knows best on that pool, which And finally, yeah, I've been a user since early 70s and continue to hope to do so, and happy to see what's there as it currently stands. So 20 seconds left. So, hey, look, thanks very much for listening. And
thank you very much.
we're genuinely interested.
Thank you very much.
We appreciated Tori and the like coming up to our meeting. Truly, that was the one I went to on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in. Thank you. We go to our next submitter now. You're online. Lewis Thompson, welcome. If you'd like to unmute yourself, and you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. We're still on mute. We'll just get you sorted so we can hear you. I think you do have to unmute yourself, Lewis.
Are you there? Perhaps I can start in the meantime on behalf of Gear while he unmutes himself. I work for him under the auspices of Mega Properties Kōrau Limited.
Thank you. Yes.
And a submission, one that I completed on behalf of the company, based around our the water remission rates, which I can speak to in the interim, which is we were in the unfortunate position of having to remedy some leaked pipes as a result of infrastructure failing on our site. During the process of COVID, it was several months, probably about 9 or 10 months before we were made aware of our extreme water usage, which indicated that there was actually a leak on site. Now, the moment that we were made aware of it, we remedied it within a relatively short period of time, as was practical under the terms we were all operating at that stage. However, we as a company have been left with a significant water remission bill to the tune of almost $200,000, which, while we're grateful the remission policy was applied and some of that's been removed, the balance, which is, you know, a seriously heavy amount of money, is still left for us to pay when we had no ability to foretell the situation. Not only that, but in the process of actually remedying the situation, we were also charged a development contribution fee to repair pipes. So it was a bit of a double whammy, really. It was like not knowing that there was a water leak because of interruptions to council services, receiving a massive bill with the idea that we did actually have a leak, the cost to remedy the situation, and then having to pay a development contribution to actually remedy the task just seems all incredibly heavy-handed. And the remission scheme doesn't seem to allow for one-off cases where circumstances are extenuating beyond the norm. And I know that there are hundreds of thousands of properties in Wellington and you can't be flexible with everybody, but as a general policy, it'd be nice that there was some degree of flexibility around that. Unfortunately, that's the only topic that I'm actually was prepared to actually speak on today on behalf of Gear, and it looks like there's trouble there with the muting. Would it be possible to move on to the next speaker and perhaps give us an opportunity to unmute?
Yes, we have about 3 minutes left, so let's leave that on the clock, and we can come back to you if we resolve that issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Is Craig? Oh, Craig, you're online. If you could unmute yourself.
Mike. Mute.
Yes, we can hear you now, Craig.
You can hear me?
Yes, you have 5 minutes.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, sweet as, cool. Sweet. Hey, I've been using the pool since I was, like a teenager, and obviously, these stories are very interesting, but there's money involved as well. But I've been using it for a long time, and my daughter, when she was born, I started taking her at 3 to 6 months, and I've been taking her ever since. The nature of the pool is that because it's outdoors, Well, for a start, it's better for you because there's not a chlorine kind of floating around in the normal pools, but also you can kind of progress children very easily. And what I've noticed with most of the pools, and I've been to all of them in Wellington, is that most of them aren't particularly kid-friendly. They're kind of toddler-friendly, some of them, especially, say, the Johnsonville one. There's very little for kids to do. The Thorndon pool pretty much excludes children, and if there are kids, the adult swimmers are usually pretty kind of pushy in terms of getting them out of there. This pool is nearly a child-based pool. There's a single swimming lane for adults. The rest of it's for kids. And in a community and a country which is surrounded by ocean, one of the most important skills I think you want is for kids to be able to swim, and swim confidently. So my daughter's grown up, and from there she's now at the age of 12. And she moved from the little pool at the end, which you might not know if you haven't been there, into the second pool. Eventually said, I'd never swim the big one. Now, this year she swam 50 lengths. And so it's just maybe an uninteresting personal story, but, that's her development along the whole trip. She's met, probably hundreds of kids. When she was young, she was actually kind of semi-adopted by some of the little kids and the lifeguards. They would look after her, while I swam. And she kind of formed these relationships. And I think, this is, like the person before me, I've never been particularly political. This is the first time I've ever spoken or done something like this. And it was really because, if an opportunity like this goes away, it's gone forever. There really aren't many places, especially for that group above the kind of toddler stage, to go to a pool or, to be honest, to go anywhere physical, active, unless you're like maybe a skateboarder or something. There are very few things. And so in the time that I go there and when it opens, I basically look forward to this pool every year. When it goes there, I go there every day. Doesn't really matter about the weather to me. And, all you see is kids out there, not on their cell phones, not doing, these other non-activities, actually engaging and being healthy. And, I understand things about money, but essentially in a city council or in any council, buses, trains, pools, libraries, they don't make money. That's not actually their function. They're not a profit-gaining enterprise. They are part of the community. And that's really, I think that's the thing that's got me and probably a lot of other people kind of upset, is that money seems to be jumping in. And the problem with the money in this case in particular is that the figures are totally wrong. They've for some reason decided that we wanted a gold-plated pool. And in fact, all we want is the same pool that's been there for 99 years to stay there. I don't want it to be heated. Personally, I can't see any point in heating a pool that's open for summer. It's expensive and we don't need it. The kids don't complain about it, and we don't want a bunch of wimpy kids who can't deal with cold water. Also, as time goes on, it's only going to get warmer. So, you're going to have more and more need for a pool. And I don't know if you guys have ever been there in summer, but there's actually a line, down the road, right down to the car park, of people trying to get into the pool when it's hot. And if we have more hot days, the indoor pools are quite sticky and they're not actually very comfortable to swim in. And as I was saying, they don't actually support children. They support toddlers or adults swimming. And none of the other pools really do this. Maybe other Hut, I haven't been there. But anyway, this pool is fantastic. There's nothing like it. And I've been all over the world. All over the world. I've never left New Zealand. I've been all over New Zealand. I've been to a lot of pools, and this really is one of the most beautiful, attractive pools. And if I walk past it and see a piece of concrete sitting there, I'll cry. So I thought I'd better tell you that this is very relevant. It's a thing that if we lose it, and we lose it on our watch, you'll always walk past that and go, that doesn't exist anymore. And it doesn't exist because we didn't do anything about it and we weren't passionate enough about it. And, I'm very passionate. I just think this would be a real loss if I lost it, but more so, if my daughter lost it, and then if she had kids, if her kids lost it. So, I don't quite know where my 5-minute run's there, but that's pretty much it. I think the big key is that we don't want anything changed. We don't want an upgraded pool. We don't, and I haven't met a single swimmer, and I know half the swimmers there at least. We don't want it to be heated. We don't want anything fancy. We don't want a new fence. We don't need any of this stuff. And obviously, very luckily to say from Kōrau.
We are out of time,
Yep.
Craig.
Cool.
Just
Great.
when you said about time, that was almost exactly 5 minutes.
Okay,
so
sweet.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I understand we can go back to Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Wonderful. And we'll reset.
Yeah.
So you've got 3 minutes to speak with us.
Okay, thanks very much. No, I think the previous speaker was speaking a lot of sense then too. A lot of these things, they get overdone. I'll be as quick as I can. Look, with the business about Three Waters, I think they need to fix the problems, obviously, and try and be as frugal as they can on the capital improvements. But Wellington Water itself needs to be scrutinised to make sure that they're not doing silly things. And I understand one of their big costs is traffic management, where they have, lots of traffic management around things that could be simplified, and that applies to many other roadworks and things as well. Regarding the weekly rubbish, I think option A, where they just carry on as they were and have rubbish bags. The cost of doing the environmental separate pickup, I don't think is warranted, and it's not very environmentally friendly running a truck around a lot just for that either. And with the business about the selling the airport shares and having a separate investment thing, I think it's far simpler to keep the airport shares. They've got a monopoly there, and you don't want another board running another thing which could make money and might not. I think it's just simpler to leave it the way it is. As regards that's the investment fund I've covered. The other one was, I think it's time to avoid most of the unessentials at the moment. Every household and business is struggling at the minute, and I think we need to keep the costs down to the basics, not having these fancy projects that might eat a lot of money and put the rates up. This rate rise is excessive and needs to be whittled right back. And I think the Golden Mile idea, costing a fortune, should be scrapped, and the retailers in there will be losing car parks, and that won't be any benefit to them at all. It is, the rates rise at 16.4% is just totally over the top. And I think that's my main points. If anybody wants to ask me any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Yes, we have just 30 seconds, so one quick question from Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, was it Susan? What part of the city are you based in? It'll just be good to follow up on the issue you've had. Sorry, you're on mute now, Susan.
Oh, she's in Tawa.
Yeah, okay.
Outlet City.
Yeah. Sorry, Ben, I'm out in Tawa.
Okay, okay, we'll touch base with you, Susan.
Yes, thank you so much.
Also, could I just add one little point about the proposed car parking out in Tawa? I think if they ever do put meters out there, which seems a bit of an overkill, have an hour free like they do here in Nelson, because it gives people a chance to do some shopping or do something, but maintains a turnover, because people try to do what they can in the hour and move on.
Thank you so much for taking the time to make your submission. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Rodney Barber, welcome from the Newlands Resilience Group. And you have 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillor Matthews, Morena, Mayor, Councillors, and Po Iwi. Ko Rodney Barber, tōku ingoa. I'd like to speak for 4 or 5 minutes and then leave 5 minutes for questions. I'm representing the Newlands on behalf of the Newlands Resilience Group, 26 local leaders, Ngā Hauiwha, Papaparangi Marae, and 4 Wellington networks. The Newlands Resilience Group is governed by the Aotearoa Community Resilience Network Charitable Trust, and I'm accompanied by Matua Joe McLeod, who is on the Charitable Trust Board with me and on the Marae Board. We submitted our Newlands business case to you on the 12th of February and made an oral submission to this committee on the 14th of February. At that meeting, the chair of the committee asked, what will you implement? So we've come back to expand on what I said last time. Our business case promotes investment to significantly improve community and disaster resilience in Newlands over the next 2 years and eliminate systemic economic, social, cultural and governance vulnerabilities identified through past surveys over the past 5 years. We want to be a suburb where we are connected to others regardless of differences, prepared to respond to and recover from disasters, and proactive in speaking with our voices into decision making, seeking solutions. We value that the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable. A resident could be culturally capable but economically vulnerable, or vice versa. A community can be resilient if a holistic and sustainable approach is taken to the well-being of its people. A resident, particularly a vulnerable one, is more confident if his or her community is resilient. A suburb is more likely to be disaster resilient if it's firstly community resilient. So we aspire to 5 principles: that people find fulfillment in community relationships rather than simply consumption and leisure. Secondly, that people understand their role within society rather than being a collection of individuals. Thirdly, that people are free to help others rather than wanting freedom from others. That there is competition and cooperation, and the focus is on well-being rather than simply material wealth. We believe that all New Zealanders want to see their communities flourish, want to be involved in shaping their communities, and they recognise the importance of communities working well together in the face of challenges and disasters at both local and wider levels. We will implement a coordinated provider-centric economic, social, cultural, community and disaster resilience system connected to residents. The concept design is in the business case provided to you. This investment we need is in people, not things. Once the investment is secured, we'll do 2 things concurrently. The first thing is to start recruiting 12 people to be employed, contracted to the Wellington-wide networks, not us as a charitable trust. Those 12 represent 4 people to recruit 200 volunteer neighbourhood support coordinators to establish 100 neighbourhood support groups, 4 navigators in existing networks, whether that's religious or ethnicity or business or social networks, to help the vulnerable navigate access to the services they need, and 4 people to provide expertise to local NGOs to build local provider capability. Secondly, once we secure the investment, we're looking to launch a catalyst project, possibly a social business enterprise. There's not much of an economic engine in Newlands, so we want to change that. We estimate it will take about 6 months to recruit, train and have 12 established as a dynamic team, meeting monthly to share ideas and experience, connected into other suburbs internationally who are ahead of us in what we're trying to do. Once the team is in place, we'll do 2 things concurrently. We'll implement with one of the Wellington-wide networks a new economic system where residents can receive and give value to each other without the need for money. Secondly, implement the disaster resilience system where local needs can be met locally and quickly, where the sustenance, first aid, psychological first aid, water security, animal welfare, mobility, shelter, comms and sanitation, especially in the first few or several days of a disaster. The Newlands Resilience Group is on track to complete the detailed design and implementation planning by the end of June. This includes project planning, good faith governance, benefits realisation, risk management, change management, evaluation and the planning for the Catalyst project. The Newlands Resilience Group comprises 11 residents, diverse ages, ethnicities, skills across various suburbs of Wellington and genders. We're asking for your investment in Newlands, which we believe will become a scalable model to benefit other communities in Wellington. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Chung.
Thank you very much for this, much appreciated. Have you done a cost-benefit analysis of the cost of actually running this group?
Yes.
Okay, and can you tell me sort of roughly what the ratio is?
For in the business case, we set that out in quality detail. The preferred option we have is a benefit cost ratio of 4:1.
Great, thank you. And so what sort of ballpark help from the council would you actually be looking at?
We're open to any conversation of any support council can give. In the business case, it says to have 12 FTEs performing each year, plus a little bit more. We're looking at $1 million a year. But the point I'd make there is that for every dollar invested, there's $4 of future costs avoided. And to be upfront, my view, or our view, is that it's predominantly central government. That would be a reduction in Newlands residents requiring taxpayer-funded services, whether that's mental health or justice. There'd be some of those benefits to ratepayer services as well, in our view. Yeah.
Okay, and last question. You're talking about 11 people in this resilience group. Was it 11?
Yes.
What demographics or what sort of geographic area does it actually cover?
Internationally or within?
Sorry, just within your area. So is it just covering Newlands or was it covering,
Of the 11 residents, of the 11 people in the Newlands Resilience Group, all volunteers, there's 2 New Zealand European and 3 Newlands residents.
Great.
Afghanistan, Pakistan,
Someone else first, but yeah.
Cambodia, India, Fiji, Egyptian.
Great. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Reminder, councillors, if you can ask the questions through me so I can manage. We've got multiple people wanting to ask questions. Pauiwi Ahohaya, you're next. You're on mute, Holden. I'm afraid we can't hear you, Holden. No. I need to join the audio. Doesn't seem to be anything at our end, Holden. I'll go to another question. Sorry about that. Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Rodney, and thanks for your work. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, you've got a very substantive business case there. You've really got can you just comment a wee bit, very briefly, about how broad your view of resilience is?
It's great, as broad as it can possibly be.
I mean, it's not just making sure that there's water in people's houses if there's an earthquake. It's way beyond that. Is that right?
Yes, and what really hit us as leaders across Newlands was the result of the first survey we did in 2019, which showed high levels of loneliness, lack of connection, low sharing of cultural knowledge, low participation in cultural activities, moderate confidence in finding a job. And that got us to quite deeply consider what is community resilience, and that's where that sentence we've got is you can only be disaster resilient if a community is first of all community resilient. So it's looking at social, economic, cultural, environmental, all dimensions. The other way of answering it is we took central government's resilience strategy, which covers social, economic, cultural, environmental and governance. So that's how we're thinking about the whole suburb.
Right, and I just, so you also are in touch with the community through the surveys, this broad survey that you run. That's actually in your submission. So that's how you are getting the breadth of quantitative information.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So if we're successful in implementing this system we're hoping to put in place, it'll be the survey in October 2026 that will hopefully show there's no vulnerabilities left in Newlands.
Right. So you've got quantitative measures to actually see progress.
Absolutely, and it's all based on the Treasury Living Standards Framework, which is based on the OECD Better Life Index.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodney. Nice to see you again. We appreciate you taking time to come and visit us.
Sure.
Now, next I believe we have Gabrielle Ralph. You're online, Gabrielle? No, Mai. Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Oh, that's good. Wonderful.
So you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Kia ora koutou everyone. My name is Gabrielle Ralph. Thank you for having me today. So I am a mother of 2 girls, aged 16 and 14. Together with my husband, I run a business in Wellington that employs 26 staff. I run a charity each year that provides 2,000 hampers of food to families who are doing it tough across the Wellington region. And I have lived and worked in Wellington my whole life. I'm here today on behalf of my daughters and all young people in our city, and I'm providing an oral submission to the long-term plan, as I think it's important that not only does the council look after the physical infrastructure of the city, but they also look after the social infrastructure and ensure the city is a safe space. So our story is that our daughters go into town with their friends during the holidays and sometimes on the weekend or after school. They hang out like teenagers do. They go to Starbucks and look in the shops and go to the waterfront and all of that. In the last few months, they've come home letting me know that a man or group of men have made some pretty gross comments. My older daughter and her friends have been followed. They've been threatened with rape, and my daughter was yelled at and scratched on Lambton Quay and no one intervened. We don't want them to have to change what they do. We feel that they should be able to go into town and hang out with their mates. And we've reported the scratching incident to police, but we feel that we want to do more. And we feel that we shouldn't just have to tell them to suck it up and accept it, and that's the way it is. So earlier this year, we decided to firstly see if we could find out a little bit more. Does this just happen to them, or does it happen to other people? We posted a survey on Facebook in a closed group, and within just over 24 hours, we had 67 responses, and the responses were very alarming. So 96% of people who responded that said that they had experienced harassment or inappropriate behaviour in Wellington City within the last year, and incidents range from verbal harassment to sexual assault. The majority felt these incidents occurred frequently across the Golden Mile, so streets such as Lambton Quay, Manor Street, Cuba Street, Courtney Place and Dixon Street. 78% did not report these incidents to police, often due to scepticism about the effectiveness of reporting. And there's so many comments in the survey, 200 comments in the survey, and a lot of them are shocking. But just as one example, one person said in November 23, I was walking on Cuba Street after leaving my corporate job around 5 p.m. when a man yelled at me, "Nice boobs, let me touch them." I was in corporate office appropriate clothing, yet I was still sexualised. Another time I was with two of my friends walking down Tory Street when a man pulled up in his car, rolled down his window and was masturbating while looking at us. This was in broad daylight. So as you can imagine, we were overwhelmed by the responses to the survey, and we felt if we went more widely, we would get a lot more, but we decided just to stop and think about what we would like to happen. And particularly because for women, we feel that these kind of comments, when we think about people being on the receiving end of them, it's not just the words, but it's also the implication of the depth of violence that comes with it. So what we'd like to happen is to bring more awareness to this issue. We understand that it's not something we can police our way out of, and that there is big issues at the heart of it. But in the countries that we compare ourselves to, like Australia, the UK, Canada, and the US, they formally recognise this type of inappropriate behaviour and comments as street harassment, which is a form of gender-based violence, and they have strategies to deal with it, including education campaigns on how to recognise and diffuse or deflect harassment when you see it, and real-time reporting so local governments and decision makers can take action in hotspots. In Melbourne, the Victorian government invested in a bystander campaign across their public transport system designed to educate the community on what street harassment is and how to safely intervene or provide support. I cannot see anything comparable in New Zealand. I believe that safety for our young people, particularly during the day, should be an absolute priority, and I'm keen to advocate for this on behalf of our family, but also for others who feel unsafe in our city during the day.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. I'm afraid we are out of time, but I just want to acknowledge and appreciate you sharing the story of both your whānau and the work that you have done to research from your community, and to let you know that it has had an impact on councillors, and we will be following up with what the contents of your survey. Thank you. Thank you so much.
For your time. Thank you.
Is Paul Thomas? Oh, welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
No, Mai, you have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you very much. My name is Paul Thomas. I'm a planner. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an engineer, but I'm a planner of some 40 mumble years and an independent commissioner. So I've been around the traps a fair bit. And this is the first time I've ever made a submission on my own account as opposed to for clients. This is about climate change adaptation. It links to proposal number 3 on your insurance issue, which relates to natural hazards. It also links to your infrastructure strategy. Council assets are vulnerable, but so is the wider fundamental fabric of the city, the harbour, and the coastal edge. Your own information tells us a fair bit about the scale of the problem. NIWA's modelling for your district plan process showed the combined effects of sea level rise and land sinking could be nearly 2 metres. The zone of effects is increased by storm surge and flood risk from extreme events. The infrastructure strategy itself states that 21,755 buildings and 319 kilometres of road are at risk from that level of change. And of course, some of those in the CBD are not small buildings. This is the bulk of the CBD, the port, the stadium, rail, homes, businesses all around the harbour. And of course, it's not just Wellington City, it's Petone, Seaview, and the coast to Eastbourne. The long-term plan and the infrastructure strategy, in my opinion, fail to respond to this crisis. As with council's assets, the insurance crisis comes first, resulting in paralysis of the property market. And this is now imminent. There's been a fair bit of media coverage of the problem of getting insurance in some parts of the city now, and Petone. And once you've got that, you can't get a mortgage, the whole market collapses. So, the answer. A strategy is required that gives the city and its insurers confidence that the risk is being managed. The city, together with Lower Hutt City and Wellington Regional Council, must urgently commit to a feasibility study of a barrage-type structure at the Wellington Harbour entrance. This would seal off the harbour twice a day at the top of each tide and protect from extreme conditions when required. Wellington is very fortunate to have a narrow harbour entrance, only 1,800 metres across the heads, and a very large harbour volume of water. To maintain a maximum tide height, the barrier closing will obviously increase over time as sea levels rise, and ultimately passage through it wouldn't be feasible for port or ferries, and would ultimately need to be converted to a lock. The big feasibility unknown is whether, or perhaps for how long, a large flood event at the same time as closure can be accommodated, i.e. the Hutt River, and whether there are potential solutions that can address this. Clearly, timing, funding, cost benefit, avoiding individual sea protection costs, etc. are all matters to assess. The LTP needs to give Wellington and its insurers the confidence that this is being fully explored. So I've kept that very brief. My submission has a bit more detail in writing, but I did want to leave time for questions.
Councillor Free.
Thank you very much. As you may be aware, Kilburney's now zoned for fully upzoning due to decisions made. What's your view about the vulnerability of Kilburney?
Yep, it's the second cab off the rank in my view.
Which is the first one, Petone?
Well, the heads.
Okay.
The heads, but that leaves Kilbirnie, Lyall Bay, etc., low-lying, vulnerable. I think once you've looked at the feasibility of that heads project, the next thing is to look at how you deal with possibly airport development combined with protection across Lyall Bay to roundabout. Trying to think of the Hungerford Road. In my view, the rest of the south coast is proverbially stuffed. But you could. It's obviously it's money and protection of assets, and you, in my view, you need to build that into future planning for the airport. So it's that's the next one.
Thank you.
One very quick question from Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. I was just wondering if you're aware of any other cities doing things around this in the world. I think Jakarta might be one, but is there anything else you can think of, or examples?
Every city is different. There are other cities in New Zealand that have narrow harbour entrances that can be looked at. There are some parts of New Zealand where it, can't even be considered. I mean, you obviously look to our history of water engineering and power schemes. You also look to countries like Holland that have been a metre below sea level for hundreds of years now and survived as a community and with infrastructure. So there are, but their rivers don't have the velocity of the Hutt River and volume. So there are examples. I think Wellington could lead the way, in terms of testing feasibility of this. It's got the engineers, it's got the scientists, it's got NIWA, it's got models of the harbour, it's got the tools you need to actually look at this without starting from scratch.
I'm afraid we are out of time. There were some unanswered questions, but thank you so much, Paul. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much.
I would now like to welcome to the podium Debbie Port. Welcome, Debbie. No, Mai, you have 5 minutes, including time for questions.
Okay, hi guys. Now, I'd like to share a story with you guys because I want you guys to think about the low-income households here in Wellington if you are contemplating these water meters. Now, I lived at Granville Flats from 2013 to 2022, and a month into me living there, I had hot water issues. Now, I logged jobs after jobs after jobs. City Care were the contractors tasked with fixing stuff. And this went on for 2 years. And then I had a maintenance inspection done, and this guy was in my bathroom, pointed to the wall, and I go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, that's effervescence caused by a leak." Now, 3 weeks passed, didn't hear anything because he didn't report it back, and I made a phone call. "Oh, we didn't hear anything about that." They sent somebody out, and sure enough, they found a leak. So please think about, because that actually cost me in terms of my power, so imagine what it would have cost me in terms of water. So if you are going to implement water meters, please look at what you're going to charge people, especially low income. Will you consider cheaper rates for people with a gold card and a community services card? Also, please get your billing system sorted. I've read horror stories about people getting sent a year's worth of bills for water. People can't afford that. So please make sure that people can be billed monthly if you're going to go down this track, and make sure that they're smart meters, because I've just had to deal with another tenant's power, and it's been a nightmare getting her power situation sorted because of the stupid meter. So please think about these things. But the other thing is we can't keep burying rubbish. That's the other issue that I've got. We've now got a power crisis. We're being threatened with power cuts because we haven't generated enough electricity, because we haven't been producing enough wind. So let's start diverting our rubbish away into what's called a waste-to-energy plant. Sweden do it, other countries do it, and this will help make power more stable, that we don't face power cuts in the middle of winter. And the other thing is, what are we doing to make water resilient? Have we thought about a desalination plant, which overseas do, to deal with shortages? Any questions?
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that, and also our little chat earlier on. These projects are absolutely huge, particularly desalination and having furnace. Singapore does it. And so where do you think this would come in the list of jobs that actually Wellington needs to do?
Well, they need to be done because we can't keep brewing rubbish. And we don't want to be facing blackouts in the middle of winter. And this is where the government could come in. If you put a proper thing to the government, they might be interested in actually helping fund this. And I hear they're not paying for water. And they're not paying land rates. So there's an opportunity because, I was part of the Citizens' Assembly. Yes. And we said to lobby the government, find new ways to generate revenue. Here's your opportunity with these things.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I just had one question, and thank you for the work that you do with all the tenants and the Te Toi Mahana housing as well, was around the issue with the leak. Do you think in charging for that some sort of process where if you were able to demonstrate there was a leak and it was fixed, you would get sort of a rebate on your bill of effectively how much water was lost?
Yeah, that would be fair compensation because these leaks aren't being fixed quick enough and we're ending up with sinkholes, which costs you guys more to fix.
Fantastic, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? One more quick one, Councillor Chung.
I'm sorry, you were saying you're at Granville Flats. Now, aren't they being sold or they're being emptied?
I've now at Berkeley Della, but I was there for just over 9 years.
Oh, I see, okay.
And, every tenant's been moved out. The last one, once the locks were changed, she decided, I better jump on board and move house.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Nice to see you and thank you for the time to make your submission. Now I'd like to welcome our next submitter who's online, Amy.
Hi, just taking myself off mute and sticking on my camera.
Thank you, Amy. You have 5 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Lovely. Well, I'll keep it short because I think the majority of detail was in my submission. The two things I wanted to touch on today, and the two things I touched on in my submission that were of sort of the most interest to me, were the parking charges in suburban areas and also the proposal for Kandala Pool. I'll touch very briefly on the parking charges in suburban areas. Reading through the proposal and the areas affected, I do wonder very much about the cost and benefit of having parking charges in those areas. A lot of them don't have, I think one of the ones that was mentioned was Kōrau, another was Calvin, and I think Newtown as well. I'm just wondering if there needs to be some sort of more work done in terms of the cost benefit analysis, given that there's not that many parks to charge anyway. And I feel as if Johnsonville will be in a similar boat. And whether or not installing a parking meter, getting the people to enforce it, and everything would actually bring a lot of revenue, would actually outweigh the revenue that is gotten from a lot of those parks. So that was something that wasn't really mentioned in the proposal, and I think it probably needs some further examination if it's something that the City Council wants to go forward with. It would also be a very unusual step for a city of Wellington's size. If you look at Paris, for example, they don't charge for parking unless it's in the little snail, the 20 arrondissement, and they've actually got some quite innovative sort of charges for cars as well that might sort of burn fuel. So that's something that I think could, that you could take a think outside the box approach to charging for parking rather than charging in suburban areas. The next one I wanted to touch on is a cause very close to my heart as a Kandala resident, the Kandala Pool. And I imagine this will be something that has been well covered by a lot of submitters, and especially by the people who have organised the Save the Kandala Pool group. Having read the proposal in the long-term plan, I was quite concerned to see a cost that, and when I sort of asked questions about it, where the cost was based on, where it was based, like what sort of time and energy had you done a tenders process. There wasn't really much involved, and there's been a compelling case presented by the Save Our Pool group, which says a lot of the 11.7 million that's quoted for the refurbishment of the pool is actually due to earthworks and a number of other things which would need to be done if you paved it. And the cost for paving it and the cost of like a smaller pool would be similar. Now, Kandala is one of 2 outdoor pools in the Wellington region, if I've got that right. The other one is Thorndon, which is in the middle of town. down, and that is a heated pool. And in the long-term plan, they say that Thorndon has a lot greater it has a lot greater people attending it. And I would probably say that's because it's heated, and Kandala is in desperate need of an upgrade. If you closed Kandala, the closest pool to me would probably be in Petone, and there would be another in Eastbourne. And I think if you look at any of the outdoor pools in the hut, you can see the value of investment that goes in outdoor pools, particularly for children and particularly for adults as well. I note that the Thorndon pool doesn't have a children's area like the Kandala one does. And I think it's unique in terms of its value, in terms of its historic significance to the area and everything. And the proposal, which proposes to expand the park and add community facilities, I don't see as adding a lot of value to Kandala, considering that there is a park already there and we have the community facilities. So I think it would be a much sensible idea to sort of have a look at that quote, send it out for tendering and see what sort of the real cost is, and then present a sort of a more balanced view to Wellington. And that would be, I think, the sort of the best way to go. I am happy to answer questions. I notice I have 45 seconds left. So,
so I think we'll get
there we
one
go.
quick one in. Amy, Councillor McNulty.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for your submission. Did you notice reading through the documentation anything about 85% utilisation in our parking policy being the trigger for parking meters, and that no suburbs currently hit that mark? Did that come across to you in what you read?
Yes, it did. Yeah, and I guess that was sort of another thing. Yeah. So, again, I did take that into account in reading. And again, it didn't really sort of leave me with, great thinking as well. So I hope that helps and explains things.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's been a while since I read it.
Thank you, Amy. We appreciate you taking the time to both write your submission and come and speak with us today. Thank you.
No problem. Best of luck with the process, and thank you very much for giving me the time.
Thank you. I'd next like to invite Nick Ruane. Kia ora, Nick. You have up to 10 minutes, including time for questions. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you. It's nice to be here. I'm going to speak on, in my submission, I put 3 issues in front of council. There may hopefully be time to speak about a 4th issue, but we'll just see how we go. I'm going to speak initially about airport share sale. And I'm just going to put on record that I'm not in favour of the sale of the shares. For me, this is really an issue of repeating of history. We have gone through the process of selling assets in the past in our country, and it hasn't gone particularly well. We can also look to examples of the selling of public assets, particularly airports, and we look to Sydney as the best example of that, and that has resulted in the degradation of conditions for workers and also the increase of costs back to the airlines, which has ultimately resulted in larger costs to consumers. So from my perspective, if we do that, it will be a backward step for both our workers here in Wellington and also the people who choose to fly through our airport. Additionally, putting an accessibility lens on this, when I was on the AAG, we had an opportunity to talk about accessibility issues through the airport, and because council has an opportunity to have that discussion with the airport, if we chose to sell those shares, we would no longer have that type of opportunity to influence the airport. So from my perspective, that would be a backward step. So moving forward into the next area, which is the community facilities review. So initially I was quite skeptical about what this would deliver. I looked at the end result and I was actually quite positive in what it did actually deliver. So I'd like to thank councillors, staff for what it did deliver. I usually don't show up at these meetings to say thank you, but it's not a usual posture for myself, but we did actually get some things done. I would like to make some comments though, that all of our community facilities should be audited for accessibility to make sure that they meet the needs of our community. Greater funding priorities should be given to community funding allocations that score higher in the accessibility audits, and we should look to meet the needs, look to meet the gaps in the audits when we see them coming back for the facilities that are not quite there yet. And I'm not in favour of giving funding to facilities that are in private ownership to meet the needs of those facilities, particularly around issues like earthquake strengthening. If a building's in private ownership, that's really up to the private owners to make those adjustments and get those buildings up to scratch. Now, there was an issue that was brought to my attention quite recently around parking fees, which I've spoken to Laurie about. Generally speaking, I think we should be encouraging everyone to get out of their private vehicles and use public transport and active transport. But there are some members of our disability community that that's not an option. And there are also members of our carer community who use vehicles to provide cares to the disability community. So an issue was presented to me recently which told me that there was going to be a cost delivered onto that community to deliver care to disabled people and elderly. And that could be up to $18 a day, it could be up to thousands of dollars a year, because people were providing care every day. And I think we need to provide an equity lens over these types of policy responses, because clearly this wasn't thought about when this policy option was considered. This is a community that's under huge funding pressure at the moment. It's under all sorts of pressure from not just local government, but central government, predominantly a female workforce. It's under pay equity pressure at the moment. And I just don't think we should be putting any more pressure on this workforce at the moment, if we can choose not to. So I'd ask you to really think quite seriously about that and put an equity lens over that particular aspect of parking. It looks like I've got a minute, so I will ask you to think very seriously about how you provide disability voice and leadership in council. I've been on record over that issue over the last little while, and I think council can do better. Things like citizens' assembly clearly are a way to do it. I think you can do better. I think you can facilitate disability voice in a much more inclusive way. And that's all that I will say on that today. I'm happy to take questions if you choose.
Yeah, I've got a question from Councillor Rogers.
Kia ora, Nick. Thank you very much for coming in. My question was about the auditing of facilities for accessibility. Is that something that you see as happening when the facility is put into action, or is that kind of something that would happen on a more ongoing basis that would look at both the built amenity but also, I guess, the servicing of it, the way that we're using it?
I think that's something that we should do when before a facility is coming on stream, but there are changes that happen to facilities as a result of use. So I think that's something that we should be building into our programs of work. Yeah. Like, for example, when we have a contract renewal, that would be a good process or time to build an accessibility audit in. So, for example, if we're putting out like you do 3-year funding reviews, right? So that would be a good time to fit in an accessibility audit to make sure that the facility is fit for purpose and make that a condition of funding.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming in. Regarding disability facilities, where do you think we could have actually improved what we're currently offering?
Sorry, can you clarify what you mean by disability facilities?
So when you're looking at members of your group, now it's going to run across a full range of different things. So are there people in your group who say that, oh, I wish I had this, or this would actually help me, or this is a real problem for me to actually do this or go there because of particular reasons. Are there things that you'd like to highlight that we could actually be doing relatively simply?
I think, Councillor, I'm here in a personal capacity, but I think the things that I can highlight to you are things that can be provided to Council in a professional capacity. And that's why I said in my submission that Council should be engaging professional services to deliver accessibility audits as a result of, and in the process of engaging community facilities. I mean, I can give you my reckons right now, but that's nowhere near to the level of engaging professional services around an accessibility audit. And my strong advice to Council is to engage professional services to take this seriously, to get the reports when you're engaging and giving out contracting, because get 5 people in a room, get 5 different opinions. So take this seriously, get the advice, and then you can make the decisions based on professional, evidence-based advice.
We have time for a quick question from Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Thank you for this. And my quick question is, you are known for your community advocacy in a lot of places, not only to accessibility. So what do you think the potential demolition of Working Men's Bowling Club, which is in Newtown, should have been included in the long-term plan consultation?
Yeah, I mean, that's an issue that's quite close to my heart because that's a facility that I live quite close to that facility. I've been involved in it. Ultimately, I would like to see that facility rebuilt in a way that facilitates the broader need of the community. But because that facility is privately owned, it complicates the issue. And I feel like that's a responsibility for the owners of that facility to take on board. It does deliver council services within a part of that facility, but that's really a decision for council to make around whether it should be bulldozed. But clearly at the moment, it doesn't meet the needs of all members of the community. I'll give you a good example. There was a group called Silver Noodle Soup, who are a very inclusive, disability-oriented creative group. They had to move out of that facility because it was not wheelchair accessible. There were stairs everywhere. There was no ability for the members to go there. So they had to move. And that's a great shame because they loved that facility. It was wonderful, but they couldn't be there.
Thanks, Nick. I'm sorry, we are out of time. We appreciate you taking the time to come in.
Apologies.
Thank you.
Very much. Good luck.
And Edwin Rakanui, no mai. You have 5 minutes, including time for questions if you'd like to leave any of that 5 minutes.
Fabulous. Do I have to use this?
You do need to use a microphone because we have some people online. Sure. Thank you. The table, if you'd feel more comfortable,
yeah,
we can put it. Yeah. You don't want to give us a lecture. If we could just make sure we switch the mic on for Edwin. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. So the future of Newlands should not be determined in a building on the terrace. Kia ora everyone, my name is Edwin Rakanui. I own a company that provides executive leadership to business owners within Wellington. I host a podcast that is on the top 10% most shared worldwide on Spotify. I've also personally led design teams that have identified $200 million of savings for ACC. And for the last 40 years, my family and I have lived at 96 Kenmore Street in Newlands. I'd like to talk about 3 elements of what I've seen with the proposed paid parking that is being projected or proposed as part of the long-term plan. The first one is the evidence base that's being used to support your decision-making processes. My expertise is in design methodologies. We place massive amounts of emphasis on ensuring that the evidence base that we make our decisions on is robust. Unfortunately, I have not seen that same level of resilience and robustness in the evidence that the Council has been using as part of your process. What I have found is that information that would be accessible in other areas is hidden on websites or unfortunately captured in silos within the council's organisation. This has made it extremely difficult to understand where the council is making its decisions from. That lack of transparency for a person like myself that feels quite savvy in this space must feel daunting for anybody else that's living in Newlands, particularly considering the demographic of that area contains a large number of migrants and people with English as a second language. The second point I would like to raise is that the symptom that we are currently facing is this income stream, the paid parking. This is a symptom of a core issue. The core issue, as everyone around this table knows, is the lack of management of the budget that you have been receiving through ratepayers. If used effectively, we would not be in a situation where we're looking at trying to put paid parking into Newlands Mall. Thirdly, I'd like to propose a solution, or at least a next step. Right now, the people of Newlands that I've spoken to, and this includes most of the business owners at Macmillan Court, including Marcus Anderson, who I'm sure if any of you have done your homework, is a prominent businessman in Wellington, very successful, is almost completely unaware of this meeting taking place. Having spoken to the people, the key people within the community centre, and also at the local churches, all of them are unaware of what's going on right now. Now that suggests to me that the consultation process that has been taken so far is not reaching the target audience. What I propose is that the next step from here, before this gets put onto the long-term plan, is that you design a solution that is inclusive of the community that you're about to change. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty has a question.
Thank you for coming in. Just counter, I suppose, to that third solution, would a better solution to be take the paid parking proposal off the table entirely?
Thank you for that question. It feels like a patsy one, but look, in principle, I'm not against paid parking. I can see benefits to it. What I am against is poorly designed consultation processes. What I am against is decision-making processes that are based on poor evidence bases, on a poor evidence base, I should say. That's what I'm against in principle. If after we go through that process, we determine, yes, the evidence base is resilient, yes, this is the right approach to take, then by all means, make that decision. That's what you're here for. But I encourage you to get those right first. After all, it's the long-term plan. My family and I have been there for the last 40 years. We'll probably be there for another 40. Whatever you decide is going to have an impact on us and everyone around us, as we know. I think there was another question.
No, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for taking the time to come in and speak with us. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
Edmund.
Thank you all.
Kia ora. All right, councillors, we have a break till 5:15 and then we will return with the final block of submitters. Councillors, can you take your seats? Councillors, can you take your seats, please? Councillor Randall, could you please sit down? Thank you. I'd like to welcome Christopher Rawson. Christopher, you have 5 minutes, including time for questions.
Kia ora. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Rawson. I'm here today because I am vehemently opposed to the Council's proposal that motorcyclists pay $2.50 per hour to park in the CBD. Let's look at why the Council is making this proposal in the first place. The draft LTP essentially says ratepayers are subsidizing motorcycle parking, and the Council thinks that's unfair, and the people using the service should pay for the service. Fine, makes sense. What the Council didn't tell people in the draft LTP is how much that service actually costs and how much ratepayers pay for it. I sent an Official Information Act request in February asking how much it costs to maintain motorcycle parking across all of Wellington from 2014 to 2024. Over those 10 years, it cost around $140,000, $14,000 a year. How much is motorcycle parking costing the average ratepayer then? For residential ratepayers, it's about 10 cents a year. For non-residential ratepayers, it's about $1 a year. So framing this as a way to save ratepayers money doesn't really pass the sniff test. Meanwhile, by a very conservative estimate, the cycleways this Council is building cost ratepayers 400 times more than motorcycle parking. But the Council has explicitly said it has no plans to move cycleways to a user pays model. How is a service for motorcyclists that costs 400 times less than cycle lanes somehow more unfair to ratepayers? The Council says it can pull in $737,000 a year with its proposed parking scheme. $737,000 a year in revenue for a service that costs $14,000 a year to maintain. Where's the extra $723,000 going? Do we get a say? Let's look at a couple quick comparisons of what Wellington is proposing versus what people in other parts of the world pay for motorcycle parking. Sydney, free. Canberra, free. London, free. San Francisco, free with some metered areas capped at $10 a day. Every other city in New Zealand, free. Wellington, $2.50 an hour, all day, uncapped, every day. Over $20 a day if, like most people parking in the CBD, you're commuting for work or school. An extra $5,000 a year per person if they commute every weekday. The Council thinks this will drive people to give up their motorcycles and walk, take public transport, or ride bicycles. But according to some targeted research, you're really going to drive motorcyclists to drive cars instead. The Council seems to think that would be a good thing because motorcycles are bad on emissions. Is that true, though? No. If I ride my motorcycle from my home in the South Wairarapa to Wellington, it takes about 10 liters of fuel for the round trip. My car uses almost exactly twice as much. It stands to reason that works out to be twice as much emissions too, but you don't have to take my word for it. According to UK government research, an average motorcycle emits 113 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilometer. That's better than any car except hybrids. My car is a Nissan Tita. Because it's on the smaller side, it should be lean on emissions, right? Nah. 215 grams of CO2 equivalents per kilometer. Nearly twice as much emissions as my motorcycle. I'm not riding a bicycle 220 kilometers round trip to come to work. I'm not going to do an 80-kilometer round trip to Featherston to catch a probably canceled train either. And I'm definitely not paying more to park my motorcycle than it would cost to park my car. There are hundreds more people like me who will look at the fees Council is proposing to charge motorcyclists, and they'll say, yeah, nah, I'll just drive my car. Which means this Council will have directly and deliberately contributed to making the traffic problems in this city even worse by putting hundreds of additional cars back on the road. And you'll be making the climate crisis worse too, by forcing hundreds of students, hospitality workers, and government staff to double our carbon emissions. This Council has spent nearly 20 years looking down on motorcyclists and trying to chase us out of the city. Imagine how much better the traffic situation in this city might be in 2024 if you'd spent the years since 2007 encouraging motorized two-wheeled transport. But instead, you proposed parking charges in 2007. We said no. You proposed them again in 2011. We said no. You proposed them again in 2020. We said no. Now it's 2024, and here we are again, saying no, again. When will this council get the point that no means no? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to your submission. Thank you. Our next submitter is online, Lucy Morris.
Kia ora, everyone. A preface, I just wanted to say thank you to previous speaker in echoing everything that they said. A preface that my submission is specifically about the proposed changes to motorcycle parking in the city. To start, I fully support the communal submission put forward to the council by the city's local riding group, Wellington Riders, which strongly opposes these changes in the long-term plan. And I believe that the aggregator, Mark Sully, will be addressing you all on Thursday at 6:30 p.m. My personal perspective on the changes, I've been a motorcyclist for around 6 years, the inciting event of which was the overhaul of the public transport system by Greater Wellington Regional Council. Local bus routes were gutted, and I used to catch the bus twice a day into work, and what used to be a short trip was then 2 buses and added an extra 150% travel time each way. Riding a motorcycle was the next best sustainable thing available to me, so I began riding and commuting that way. And it might be prudent to start by explaining why motorcycles are sustainable transport and therefore something we should encourage and not discourage citizens of Wellington to be using. Using a motorbike results in a huge reduction in commuter congestion. The majority of commuter vehicles only carry 1 person with trips into the city. A motorbike uses around 1/7 of the resources taken to build 1 car, resulting in a lower embodied carbon impact. As an example of the uptake some other councils around the world have taken to motorcycle parking and commuting, Northamptonshire City Council in the UK has embraced motorcycles and scooters as a sustainable transport option for a number of years. As they state, we know that the greater use of motorcycles can bring environmental congestion and accessibility benefits, particularly on journeys made for commuting to places of employment or education, which the commuting into the city in Wellington is primarily for. This form of transport should therefore have the same status as walking, cycling, and public transport in terms of modal shift choices. Moreover, a detailed study by the Belgian consultancy Transport and Mobility Leuven found that if 10% of all private cars were replaced by motorcycles in the traffic flow of the test area, total time losses for all vehicles decreased by 40% and total emissions reduced by 6%. And a 25% modal shift from cars to motorcycles was found to eliminate congestion entirely. It makes you think what that would do to the congestion of the Victoria Tunnel, for instance, where we wouldn't have to build a second tunnel, because if we were encouraging people not to take single passenger trips in cars, we wouldn't have the same road congestion that we do here. Riders also save considerable time on end-to-end journeys. They take up less space to park and reduce the impact on our road surface degradation, which in New Zealand is also a huge problem with the condition that our roads are in and have been in lately. Smaller motorcycles and scooters are more fuel efficient, they make travel more affordable, and this also means lower CO2 emissions. Wellington City Council's reasoning for charging for parking is that the issue is high occupancy, low turnover, and the length of the stay regularly exceeds 3 to 4 hours. For one, this is largely because motorcycle riders are commuting in from other areas such as Lower Hutt or Upper Hutt for working, and they aren't visitors. But two, the reason seems to suggest that the council are actively seeking to encourage and increase traffic movement around the city by reducing the length of the stay and increasing turnover, and this seems to go against the current efforts to reduce congestion and emissions. I don't have confidence that the council will listen to any submissions critically, as many other citizens seem to feel lately, as demonstrated by the council's recent decision to move forward with the Newtown and Burhampore parking changes despite a majority opposition from the public. But I really hear you hear this objectively anyway. If it was even a bit more proportionate, it might be acceptable. $2.50 for a bike when it's only $5 for a car, which takes up the space of 5 to 6 bikes and typically only moves 1 to 2 people, seems really punitive to our community for no good reason. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today, and I really hope you listen to the motorcycle community's concerns critically.
Thank you, Lucy. We have a question for you from Councillor Rogers.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, and also for providing some of the evidence that you've looked at as well. It would be great for me to have a look at that afterwards. I did the quick maths around the sort of $3 divided by the 5 to 6 parks. That's about 83 cents an hour. Does that, sound reasonable? I mean, there's obviously the encouraging mode shift. Is your position that $0 would be better, or sort of 83 cents an hour might be reasonable?
My position is that free is better because you're encouraging people to use a less congested transport option. But I'm also aware that concerns towards this council aren't listened to, and I'd rather have a compromise than completely lose it. So if that was the only option on the table, I would take it. But the ideal is keeping it free like the rest of Aotearoa.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Lucy.
you, everyone.
We're basically out of time. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Is Eleonora online? Okay, we have one final submitter who's coming in, so we will adjourn, and if you could stay in the room, and we will wait for them, and till 5:40 if they're not. to come back, but we do now need to vote to adjourn the hui and to continue from 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, the 16th of May. That's tomorrow. I'm just reading my script, Councillor. So we will vote to adjourn, and do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Foon, and we will go to the vote. All right, thank you so much, councillors, for staying to the end, and have a lovely evening. We'll see you again for this tomorrow.